Hi everyone, and welcome to Uncovered Vintage Fashion Magazine Review. I'm Stephanie, and I've been collecting and selling vintage fashion magazines for over 20 years.
And I'm Morley. I'm a former copywriter and am now an award-winning playwright and screenwriter.
Together, we will examine some of your favorite vintage fashion magazines from the 70s, 80s, and 90s.
On Uncovered, we'll discuss some of the magazine's models, layouts, and did I mention the models?
And we'll also review some of the ads and articles that make these magazines such a great piece of pop culture history. So, fasten your seatbelts and let's get uncovered. If you remember fashion in the 70s, you will be very familiar with our next guest. Her ethereal beauty has graced the pages of some of the most memorable and interesting photo shoots in history. However, this particular guest has the further distinction of being one of the original Halstonettes, handpicked by the designer himself to present his creations to the world. Her role as house model, muse, and spokeswoman for Holston evolved into a long-standing career. She has dedicated the past 30 years to preserving, growing, and sharing the Halston legacy by lending pieces from her personal collection to museums such as the Met. She has also contributed to numerous books and movies. Ladies and gentlemen, Uncovered Vintage Fashion Magazine Review is proud to present Chris Royer. Hey, Chris.
Welcome.
Hi. Good
Thank
to
you
see
so
you
much.
all.
Thank you so much for joining us today. Could you please tell our listeners a little bit about your background and how you became a model?
Well, I was originally in my youth, I went to design school, so I was fascinated with fashion, all aspects of it, everything, all creative, artists, designers, illustrators. And so I went to Pratt Institute and I was discovered by Mademoiselle magazine, which was sort of an elite magazine at that point. And they did an article on Chris Royer Has Style. And from that editorial, it was Holston who had seen the article and said, I want to see that girl. So I was with Wilhelmina at that point, and being that young, I really didn't consider myself a model like Naomi Sims and, Elsa Peretti and all the incredible models of that time period. They were incredible. So Wilhelmina said, I think I have a perfect match because he's looking for a house model, in-house model, and muse. And since you have the understanding of the design, draping, pattern making, and stuff like that, that you two will be the perfect match. Go up and meet with him. Now, at that time, people did not know what the designer looked like. It was the designer, as Bill Blass said, they were in the back room, and it was really the owner of the company at that point. So I went up to 68th Street and Madison Avenue, and I was directed to go in the elevator, which let me off on the third floor, which opened to the actual salon. And so the salon, when it was opened, it was like this incredibly beautiful, creamy colored walls, cream-colored ivory ultra suede Parsons sofas, ficus trees, Brazilian music, Rigo candles, and cypress. It was so incredibly glamorous, relaxed, sexy, everything, and ficus trees. And on the sofa was this amazingly good-looking man in a black turtleneck and pants. So, I assumed he was the assistant because you normally go through the assistant, and then if you pass, then you'll get to meet the designer. So when I said, I am Chris Royer, and he said, we know. And I'm like, we do? So that's how we start. He says, yes, sit down, let's talk. I know you just came back from London. Let's talk about design. Let's talk about, modeling, everything else. Now, what happened was we went through the clothing and I fit everything. And we talked about both aspects of design. And at a certain point, I said, well, I was looking to meet Holston, and I said, well, how old is he? And he said, oh, old enough. And I'm like, and he goes, why? I said, well, do you think he has a sense of humor? And he says, yeah, I think he has a sense of humor. And he goes, why? I said, well, I would like to do the modeling, but then on the other side is like in, let's say, a couple of weeks, I would like to get more involved in the design. Would that be okay with him? And he goes, yeah, yeah, that's doable. That's workable. I said, oh, great. And I said, I have one more question. And he said, okay. And I said, well, I figure I got the job. And he's like shaking his head. I said, well, could you tell him that since you and I get along so well, could you and I work together? And he's like, yeah, yeah, we could do that too. And I'm like, oh my goodness. And then one of the assistants comes in the room and says, Halston, Jackie O is in for a fitting. I immediately looked around. I thought, did this man hide behind the screen or something? And I was talking to the assistant, and I'm looking, and he's on the sofa, hysterical with laughter, tears coming down his face. And I'm like going, you lied to me. And he goes, no, I interviewed you and you've got both jobs. And that's how we started.
That's amazing.
What an amazing story. And you got the answer to your question as to whether he had a sense of humor as well.
Exactly. So that was just the start of many adventures.
So, Chris, you were represented by the Wilhelmina Agency. Did
Yes.
Wilhelmina Cooper mentor you at all? And maybe you could share perhaps a little bit about what she was like?
Oh, she was amazing. Not only was she beautiful, an iconic model, and she had iconic models like Naomi Sims, Elsa Peretti, Samantha Jones in her agency. She was also very giving and would take a lot of care to guide you over what was required in the modeling, because at that time you were supposed to do your own makeup, you were supposed to bring your own shoes, your own pantyhose. You were supposed to be prepared for the entire shooting, so there was a requirement of what you had to put together to make sure that you were there. But it was more that she wanted to guide the girls into understanding makeup, because there were no real makeup artists at that point. So the girls really did their makeup. And Samantha Jones, one of her star models, was an incredible makeup artist when she did her own face. And so was Willie. But she was amazing. She was one of a kind as a teacher. And unfortunately, she passed away from cancer. And that's when I moved to Eileen Ford, which is another icon.
So Chris, let's be frank with one another, okay?
Yeah.
So you got Verushka, you got Wilhelmina,
Right.
you got Gia. Do you resent the fact that you were never just known as Chris, or when people say the name Chris, they don't automatically know Chris Royer?
Oh, no. At that time, it was, my full name is Christine. So for me, it was, okay, you're going to be Chris Royer. That's how they termed it. They would usually use two names. Some others would use a single Verushka, because Verushka's last name was so long. A lot of people would take too long, so it would just be Verushka.
Sure,
But,
I'm just teasing you, of course, but
yeah.
So, Chris, you appeared in Vogue for Deborah Turbeville's most famous shoot. It was a swimsuit layout in Vogue 1975. It took place in a bathhouse. Sandy Linter and Ariella did makeup. Suga and Christian did the hair. What were your recollections from that day? And did you sense what an important photo shoot that would turn out to be?
Well, in the beginning, I was, because of Holston and Joe Eula, I was discovered by Vogue. And when I started working with Debbie, I had known Debbie. Actually, she was the editor of my first shooting with Mademoiselle. So it was a small circle. When Debbie became the photographer that she is known for now, the shooting actually was supposed to be done with Helmut Newton in Cannes, and then it was switched to Arthur Elgort in Miami, and then at the last minute, Debbie in the West Side bathhouse in the middle of winter. It was so cold.
My.
It was like, and we had so many wonderful models there, Sunny Redmond, Yasmin, and Karen, and everybody in there, that it was like a group, and very unusual. And I think that when we finally got all dressed up, they had to keep you sort of the area wet, because they wanted the pools of the water on the floor and everything else. So it was, not only would none of us would forget it, it was like monumental, because you had Polly Mellon and several of the editors coming in to see this iconic shooting. But it was a series.
It's too bad it couldn't have been a photo shoot for some furs instead. Would have been a lot warmer.
Furs in modeling world are shot in July, and it's, unless it's in the air conditioning sort of like rooms or a big galley or something. But furs usually are, so you're really hot, and everything with furs is that they have to watch that your hair doesn't get too sweaty, that your makeup doesn't melt. It's always the complete opposite season in that way.
Well, that makes sense, because they'll be shooting the furs in the summer for the winter season.
Exactly. Yeah. Right.
And you ladies always do such a great job of, you don't look hot, you don't look cold, you just look perfect.
Thank you. That's because, great makeup artists like Sandy Littner and Rick Gillette, and then you had Way Bandy when he was alive. They always had the powder and the lip gloss and the lipstick ready to go if anything melted on your face.
Makes sense.
A lot of fashion insiders frequented Studio 54. Did you? And if so, could you share any stories?
Well, I was one of the Holstonettes, so every night we pretty much went to Studio 54. It was a great time. It was really such a fabulous, entertaining sort of time period to begin with. But when you went to Studio 54, you met everybody from all walks of life. It was very democratic. It was something where you could meet makeup artists, and then you could meet actors and actresses, and then you could meet Wall Street people, and then you could meet, young, old, all types in there. It was fabulous. And the music was so amazing. As soon as you came in, you just had to dance. And that was just amazing.
I understand that while you were modeling, Halston encouraged you and your mother to begin acquiring and collecting his designs.
Yes.
Which shows incredible foresight on all of your parts. And those pieces remain a part of your private collection. Did you know at the time how important the designs would be to the world and to your life?
Yes, I knew. I liked to collect things. I was always fascinated with collecting from my grandmother, little cosmetic, bags, also the toolings for the powder. They were beautifully done in the 30s and the 40s. And I just started collecting. He knew that I liked to do that. And that actually Tom Fallon, who worked with Holston at Bergdorf, he said that was a very smart idea to have you do the collection because for Holston to do it, there was no time, and so I started collecting, and he would dress not only myself but my mother, and he adored that because my mother she's about 5'4" in height, and he found that fascinating since I was 5'10", and how he could dress someone 5'4" and then be able to translate it back and forth to larger sizes and scale. And we knew that the pieces you would wear, and they just looked timeless all the time. But it did reach a point where the idea was to wear them what we would call lightly, and then you put them away. So then when you want to donate to the museums, that would be appropriate. The problem at that time was that the museums did not look at modern contemporary designers like Holston and Bill Blass and the such as being part of the museum collection. They thought they were too modern at that time. So it did take quite a few years before Met and FIT was one of the first to accept clothing on that level, and that's why they have the largest archive. But it's great because between Harold Coda and Andrew Bolton, it's now opening up more to see the designers of the 70s.
We were at, I think, MoMA, was it, Steph?
Yes.
A few years ago, and we saw they had a design collection there, a separate display just for fashion.
Just for fashion.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. It's finally coming to its own. It's taking a while because I think that there's so much out there, but a lot of it is not. There's different types of what is considered art, where you have you look at Andrew will talk about the art of clothing, and when there are art pieces, and so is a friend of mine, Sandy Schreier, who is also a major collector of museum quality clothing pieces. She was also she had her collection taken in by the Met 2 years ago prior to COVID. And she has an amazing collection. She actually has 15,000 pieces. So
wow.
Yeah. So Sandy is Sandy, but that's a totally different story. But
Wow.
yeah. But I think that people that collect on that level, it's now beginning to be able to be identified with what I have are the original samples. So those were touched by Holston. Once
Amazing.
it's being in production, it's like a second generation. So it's not the same thing. Beautiful, but production pieces, they tend to slightly change the sizing on the waist and other pieces because the girls were very tiny in their waist, and
Sure.
they would, cut it to make a classic fit.
Well, Steph, I have some good news for you. So once the Met opens up or creates a T-shirt collection, I'll be happy to donate all my Three Stooges T-shirts there. And I'll have to see them again.
Good, because I'm going to need some bigger closets
Okay.
for that. Chris, what do you think Halston looked for in his models, aside from the obvious? Was it an attitude? Was it personality?
Was one, I think it was uniqueness. Each girl is very different than the other one, yet they're all have personalities different, and they also come from multi racial backgrounds as well as nationalities. And I think the one thing that was pretty much consistent, that the girls were all approximately 5'9.5". The only one that was slightly smaller was Shirley, who was another fitting model. And he looked towards what Balenciaga did. He had a cabine of girls that all looked very special and different. But when you put them together, it becomes a great picture. And it also, people can associate where it becomes much more interesting. So I think he also used girls that were photographic, that would be in editorials, where at that time there used to be two ways of modeling. One would be what is called Seventh Avenue modeling with Gillis McGill. She would be in charge of that, and Ellen Harth. Those were the two showroom model agencies. The big model agencies that would handle it would be basically Wilhelmina and Ford at that time, and then later Elite. But it was more Wilhelmina and Ford. And some of the girls would do both. Like you'd see Naomi Sims, who's the famous, iconic, Black model of the time period. She got the cover of Look magazine. She was a big Holston model. And then all these girls had different ways, because she could do the Vogue layouts as well as do the fashion shows. So he looked to girls that knew how to walk and do it in a very casual and contemporary way. And then also you develop your own personal walk where you would not stomp on the ground. For me, I created my glide look.
So were you close with any of the other Halstonettes? Do you still keep in touch with any of them?
Right now, not as much because we're all sort of more involved in our own personal lives. We are, obviously getting older, and it's something where, they all have different lifestyles and they don't live. I do not live in the city anymore. So a lot of them live in different, states. So it's hard to, you communicate on Facebook, Instagram, things like that. But when we're all together, obviously it was a great big family.
That's nice.
Yeah.
As long as it's not like the Manson family or the Addams family or.
Oh no, yeah, right. Yeah. No, it was a lot of love between all of us.
Just making sure.
There's been a lot of media interest in Holston recently. You've contributed to both the 2019 documentary in which you appear and now the Netflix miniseries. What did you think of the miniseries? Was it true to your experiences?
Well, the miniseries, you have to remember, is based on Stephen Gaines' book, and that's a tell-all book, and it's something where that has been out for close to 30 years. The actual movie, Dan Minahan had worked on the script over 20 years ago. So this is a long-term project that has been brought finally, because of Netflix, that you could see it. And I think each movie that you see offers certain aspects of Paulson that it's impossible to put in one film. It's just, there's too much. He was a very productive person. His lifestyle was very complicated. You might say he was a complicated man who lived in a very diverse and complex society at that time.
So what did you think of Ewan McGregor's performance? I'm asking because while I thought it was great, I also thought he was almost channeling his inner Truman Capote in his affectations of Holston.
Well, okay. I actually, on my side, they had contacted me in regards to his hand mannerisms. So now, in other words, how to hold a cigarette and because Halston had beautiful hands, but he was very graceful in the way he talked. So Ewan had done numerous sessions with Naim Khan for clothing and Jeriana San Juan to learn how to drape, he knew that he needed to really focus on, the mannerisms that the critics said were very good. So I'm pleased at that. And Ewan is a method actor. He was fabulous. I think he did an excellent job in the whole thing. And I think the voice thing is, it changed over the years. So he watched so many compilation tapes that if you started with his voice, in the beginning, let's say the early 60s and then the 70s and the 80s, it's difficult to, it would have to be timeline to see how it all worked together. But I think he did an excellent job.
Mm-hmm. We really enjoyed it.
Mm-hmm.
Some people were surprised to see Joel Schumacher in the miniseries and learn about his association with Holston. Did you know him?
I only met him once because I came in 72, at the end of 72. Joel was not involved in the company the way it existed at that point. Joel was, physically, he was very tall and good looking. He had this gorgeous brown hair, and he was just so handsome, and when he worked, and talented, and Holston saw the talent, and he tried to mentor him in that way to convince him to get off, his dependency and to use his talent. And that's very much what Holston would do with a lot of us, nice. To encourage us and to see what we have to offer and how we can, develop it.
Halston experienced a backlash for something designers do all the time now, which is licensing their name to what many consider to be a lower end retailer. I'm going to use Target as an example. You eventually became VP of Marketing and Product Development for Revlon and went on to create your own consulting firm specializing in strategic licensing and marketing. So How did you feel about Halston's affiliation with Jcpenney? Did you ever have a conversation with him about it?
Yes, he told me that they were going to sign a contract with Jcpenney, and it would be a master licensee. Now, a master licensee is something where it's men's, women's. It's not only the clothing, it's the shoes. It's for women, it's the pantyhose, it's the accessories, it's the belts, it's the bags, it's the raincoats. So it was gigantic, but he felt this was going to be his third stage. In other words, he did millinery, then he went into designer clothing, and then the third stage would be addressing the middle, Midwest, because he came from there. So he knew that these women, like glamour, but a lot of it, going back to Holston being a mentor, he felt that if he could put a special group together, they too could be comfortable in their Halston apparel. Obviously, a lower price point because the whole thing was intended that way.
Did he actually refer to jeans as dungarees?
Well, you see, he came from the Depression.
Right.
So, in the Midwest, dungarees at that point were the thing where, they didn't have clothes. And if you were, you worked, the dungarees would be very sturdy. So, for him, the jeans, let's say when Calvin did his jeans, Calvin didn't experience that Depression and what it meant. So emotionally to Halston, it had a past, background in his relationship to looking at the fabric. But he did do quite a few denims even early on, where he did like a great denim pantsuit for women. And he took the denim fabric and really upgraded quite a bit. And if you see the clothes, you go, wow, that's really good looking. And then when you look at it closer, you go, oh my goodness, it's denim.
Right.
So he took it in a different way.
Yeah, it's just a funny term, one of those terms that you.
Yeah, it's interesting, because that's sort of a moment in time where it does. You get to see what New York people versus Midwestern people.
Well, even my wife, sometimes she'll say, well, I gotta change my trousers. Your trousers? What are you, in England? I mean, people have pants,
Right.
So
Right. Well, with Halston, one of the things that he was noted for was with his Halston pants for women, a lot of them had elastic waist, where if you wore the tunic over it, they were elastic for comfort, and, women gain and lose weight, 5 pounds there, 10 pounds, and the comfort level was very important. So, he realized that, well, if I put elastic in there, I can adjust it anyway, and we can always make sure that the woman has the right fit. So it's a great concept. But he also, if he did it with a top that tied, he created usage of his obi belt design, which would cover that area.
that's great. I'm sure they're probably huge sellers around Thanksgiving. So
They were huge sellers, period, because they were so comfortable.
yeah.
And he was known for in the early 70s at Bloomingdale's, his pajama outfits, which were very chic. You wore them all day, and you could wear them. You could just switch out the jewelry and go for evening looks, but they were really fabulous. And he also did wrap tie tops, and then you did an obi belt, a soft obi belt over it, and you had your look.
Well, I wish
And
the
you could
people that we
adjust it.
see at Walmart wearing pajamas would wear the Halston variety.
Well, the pajamas were not really pajamas. They were they were very sophisticated, soft, looks of pants and a top with full sleeves and stuff. So it looked very, very chic.
Yes.
And you could go to the finest restaurants and be accepted there.
Right.
I see them in the Vogue magazines from the 70s. They call them evening pajamas.
Yes.
Exactly.
It's an outfit.
Exactly. Right. Right.
Halston's obviously a fashion legend, but what do you think has led to the recent resurgence of interest in media coverage in the last few years? What do you think, to that point, what do you think Halston would think of it all?
I think, first of all, I think you have to remember Holston loved not only beautiful fabrics, but he also was the one who discovered and promoted ultra suede, which was at that point very tech oriented because it's really, it was produced with Torre, and it was one of the first fibers that created a look of suede, but it could be washed. So his point of view, I think, would have evolved if he was here. He would be fascinated with the new technology in fabrics, especially the stretch quality, because he used to drape so much on his own, and when he would drape, he was like a sculptor. The fabric was his clay, and he knew how to drape it and knew how to pin it and how to cut it. And when he cut, and you were standing there, and you could have 100 pins on your particular outfit. But the way he did it, he sculpted it and it made it an amazing piece. And then the workroom would dismantle it off you very carefully, keep all the pins in there, and that's how they would do the patterns.
Can you imagine if Holston were alive now and he was tech friendly and all the design programs, he would go crazy, with all the different looks he can create. This is a click of a mouse.
Yeah, you're right, Marla, because it was something where he loved Lycra. He was like fascinated with Lycra. And obviously he did it in the bathing suits, but he also did it in one of the pieces that I have, which is actually in Studio 54 Brooklyn Museum tour. It's like a gold pale Lycra dress that could be worn in different necklines, and you could wrap and tie it around your neck, or you could make it into a sarong. And it was perfect for that time period because it was so flexible. But the Lycra, he used a great deal with Martha Graham, because with the Martha Graham troupe and Liza Minnelli, you have to move. You have to be able to stretch that arm on those legs and everything else. That it just, it was a fantastic way of being able to use technical fibers in a very specific way. He also used Kiana, which I don't know how many people know about at this point. It was very new at that point. It looked like silk, and it was amazing, but it was very expensive technology at that point. And he would do this in what was called his loungewear license. They were beautiful dresses where, let's say, the ladies would those would be called their pool side dresses, where they'd wear, let's say, in Palm Beach or in California and Florida, they would wear their jewelry, and they would be near the pool with their other girlfriends with these fabulous Kiana caftans of Holston at the poolside, and not worrying about the water, but looking fabulous.
Well, I don't know about anyone else, but the only Keanu I've heard of is of the Reeves variety, as in Keanu Reeves. But
oh no, you didn't just go there.
I did.
Oh no,
I'm sorry.
Sorry, Chris.
Okay.
Chris, do you recall the last time that you spoke to Halston?
I did. It's a point where I had met him at a exhibition where he decided to go out, and it was at the Gallery Lafayette on 57th Street, and he was there with Victor Hugo, and I was in another room. I was all dressed in Holston, and it was a big gala event. And Victor said, "I have a surprise for you." Victor pulled me into the Jules Verne room, and there Holston was, and he looked so handsome, but it was you could tell his hair was the beginnings of the physical side of the HIV was kicking in. And it was, I was obvious, he was still in negotiations. So we thought that he was coming back. Everybody did. So the workroom, we were just waiting for the negotiations to finish. And so we talked. And then at the end, he said, "I have to go. Just remember, I'll always love you."
Wow.
And that was it.
So, Chris, I'm going to mention some names.
Mm-hmm.
And I'd like for you to tell us the first thing that pops into your mind, okay?
Okay.
Andy Warhol.
Loved him.
It's 2 words,
Really?
but that's okay.
Good catch.
Come on, Chris, play along. Joe Eula.
Oh, one of my best. I love Joe is like, when I first met Joe, Holston called him up and he said, well, I found her. And because he was looking for a specific type. So I had gone to a party with Stephen Sprouse and Dennis Christopher, who were Holston's assistants. And I heard this, that's my girl, and Joe was known for this very gravelly voice. And he was thinking, going, fabulous. He said, you and I are going to start working tomorrow. And that's what happened. We ended up doing warming sessions, and then Joe would sketch me because they knew how to turn, and we got along really well. So most of the what you see the croquis and things on, because I was the fitting model, we would just change the hair color once it was decided who would wear it. So, and I did actually on YouTube, there is a little short video on me, Holston memoir with Joe Eula, and it describes how Joe and Holston got me into Vogue.
Great.
And there's all the pictures of Joe's sketches.
Okay, how about Victor Hugo?
Oh, Victor was something that he was actually an artist that loved Dadaism. Now, Victor created Dadaism is before Popism. And that's why Victor got along with Andy Warhol so much, because Andy loved Dadaism, like Duchamp's urinal and everything else. So with Dadaism was always taking the everyday normal things and making them into art. So that's why Andy created, when he created Popism, he did the Brillo boxes, which you see, the Campbell soup, the Coca-Cola, that was all part of Popism. Now, Victor loved Popism as well as Dadaism, but he was in charge of doing the windows. And Holston made sure that he would do windows. And the windows on 68th Street and Madison Avenue were very, very well known. Press people used to come because they had to be changed once a week. And Victor would do very sort of interesting windows of situations, like they had Patty Hearst as, in there. They'd have, let's say, he would bring in like a pregnant woman in a bed with all her friends all dressed up in Holston and looking at what she would wear when she, had the baby. They did an amazing one once in tribute to Andy Warhol, with the books surrounded all over the place. He would create very, at that point, not only controversial, but very interesting themes that everybody used to go for, because it became art in the window. It wasn't just a simple merchandise set. It involved all of Holston's clothing, and the mannequins were all dressed beautifully, but it created a look that people wanted to see every week. And he did one actually with the mannequins. He dressed them all in black, and he had Tiffany plates, clear plates with rice and beans, and everybody, all the models were loaded down with Elsa Peretti jewelry, like the snake skin, and it was stunning. It was just beautiful.
Your answer is fascinating. I was actually looking for for your opinion on the French author, but that's okay too, Victor Hugo.
Oh, okay. We'll have to pass on that one.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of the Hunchback. I just wanted to know what you thought. A couple more quick names. Elsa Peretti.
Incredible.
Okay.
She was just an amazing, not only was she an iconic artist, because remember, she started as a model and then she evolved in there, and she was so amazing to see how she would be in the process of creating her pieces. And she's quoted in interviews that it took her a long time, but she was very methodical. She was very concentrated on her organic shapes and looks in regards to her collection, as well as to creating the fragrance bottle for Halston. 74 was when they became Halston Enterprises. Halston was able, at that point, obviously had more money, to have Joe and Elsa as consultants, and they worked on the fragrance.
So I just have one more name. I just want one word, the first word that pops into your mind when you hear this name.
Okay.
Morley Schulman. Wait, how did that get there? Did you look at Sorry, wrong. I found my glasses. Holston.
My mentor.
Okay.
My teacher, my mentor.
So speaking of Halston, which we've been doing the entire time, what would you say, Chris, is the Halston legacy?
The legacy is his designs. I think that's why part of it is like, he passed away quite a long time ago. And I think that, there are people that loved him, there are people that didn't know him. And I think now it's time to be able to recognize the legacy in the designs, because it's the designs that exist now. But a lot of it has to be pulled, because there are private collectors and there are certain museums that have certain things, and the formulation of Paulson is very sophisticated and fascinating once it's pulled, because you see how his mind worked over so many different shapes and looks and concepts.
So, Chris, if anyone would like to find out more about you or your upcoming projects, where can they go?
The best is to go to my Instagram, which is Chris Roy Collections, and I keep it that way at this point. I'm planning on doing some other, projects to have people be able to understand, all the aspects of what Holston was about. I do feel that the more that you get to see how much he produced in such a short time period is amazing. But it has to be, slowly sort of put into the process so that you can see the progression of his thoughts. And what's interesting, when you actually get to see the progression, it's like it speeds up very quickly from 73 on to about 82. That was what I consider his golden years, because he became Holston. In other words, the look of Holston, the hair, the turtleneck, and the jacket, and the way he talked. And he was very fastidious, not only about creating the image, but it also being able to make sure he could be the teacher on screen. In fact, he actually in 1976, this is how forward thinking he was, that he had Video Fashions film him, and he would practice, because at that point videos were brand new. They didn't things like that didn't exist, and it was just coming in. But he knew that he had to be able to learn how he himself had to project on camera, and he would do that religiously, and he would work with them to see how it could work, because one of the things was, like everybody, they like to use their hands. And he would tell me, whatever you do when they talk to you, don't bring your hands up to your face. Don't bring it up. And it was like, because he was learning that, how he had to handle it, because to get the command of the audience, you have to keep your hands down. It works better that way. But if you look at a lot of his old footage under Jeff Madoff, he has the Holston profile on YouTube. You get to see how clever and smart the way he talked, and how he got the words all together in a minimal way, but it conveyed the message of style, elegance, comfort, all of that. And he looked good as well.
Not only using your hands, but even, how to position your fingers, I guess.
Yes, very important.
Especially, I mean, last week alone, I was hitchhiking and I got beaten up. I used the wrong finger.
By me.
Well, with Holston, he used to smoke a lot, his Merit cigarettes. So a lot of it, even, when Ewan was doing, you see, he got it right on the mark, because Holston had a very distinctive way of holding his hand with the cigarette and then pulling away, and then pulling away also, that he didn't want the smoke in people's faces, but he knew how to pull it away in an elegant way, because he practiced film. And also part of it, which I think people should know, that when you see the Olympic Towers, it's all mirrored. And the mirror is something where I was brought in to help Mark Ricker to do floor plans for the Olympic Towers, because the Olympic Towers floor plans today no longer exist. The architect no longer is alive, and for some reason the floor plans disappeared.
Hmm.
But Halston changed it anyway to his needs anyway. So I have a photographic memory. So Amir and Amir knows how to do what is called architectural digital drawings. So I sketched it, and we went through how the doors open and close, because the film team need to know how to position everybody, because when you look at these pictures, it's infinity with a lot of the doors in there, but it's very glamorous. But for a set designer, he has to know where the doors closed and opened and everything else. So it was great. It was a great job. It was lots of fun.
So, Chris, Steph and I are moving into our new place next year. Do you think we could borrow a mirror to help us with some of the structural design of our new place?
Well, yeah, absolutely. Well, Morley, remember, it's like, the reason why we did mirrors is because that when you do a mirror, is like a photograph. So let's say if you're not quite sure, how your dress, not yours, Morley, but it's definitely how it hangs. If you go by a mirror, or if you do correct your tie, you'll see little things that have to be corrected through the mirror, and then voila, you got a perfect picture.
Can you do anything with magic mirrors, maybe? Because I think that would be better.
No, we never. Actually, those mirrors, thank God, but they were very expensive. There's the doors alone were sort of like $500,000 a piece, the sliding doors, and they're all flat, so you did not get that funny mirror effect in any of them.
Chris, thank you so much for being on our podcast today.
It's really been a pleasure.
Good. This was great.
So many of our questions, and then some.
Our listeners will.
Thank you.
And we've really learned a lot. So thank you so much.
Good. My pleasure. I think, if you go to my Instagram, I gave a complete list of all the Holston books that are available, and then I gave a listing of all the movies that have been done on Holston. So everybody can sort of like binge on Holston in different variations, because each one movie has special things in there that you learn more about Holston the man.
Now, you had nothing to do with his merger with the cat food company, like a Halston Purina, did you?
No, we passed on that.
That's Halston. Okay. Thanks.
Oh, no.
Thanks again, Chris.
Thanks,
I
Chris.
apologize for that one.
That's okay. No problem.
Thanks.
Have a great day. Thank you again. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye. Well, we hope you enjoyed this episode of Uncovered Vintage Fashion Magazine Review. Please follow us and remember to leave us a review.
We love hearing from our listeners. Please feel free to reach out to us at uncoveredvintage@yahoo.com, or on Twitter at uncoveredvfmr, or on Instagram at uncovered_VFMR. And remember to check out my store, Great Mags, on eBay and on Etsy.
Thanks for listening. Thank you for listening to Uncovered Vintage Fashion Magazine Review Podcast.
Uncovered was produced by Morley Schulman, with music by David Renda and logo design by Alan Lipman.
So remember, if you liked Uncovered, be sure to tell 2 friends about it.
And they'll tell 2 friends.
And so on, and so on, and so on.